where does confidence come into it, Caroline? Did you get the confidence? Obviously, you were in Singapore, you were very quick in terms of reacquainting to the country, the people, the culture, so to speak.
Mm.
Does that also come down to you, Caroline, having that confidence that you could move forward?
Definitely to an extent. I think I'm the youngest of four in the family.
Mm.
And so I think in order to survive, you have to be tenacious to an extent and, fight for food and a place and to be heard and all that kind of thing. So I think that there's, part of that comes with that. And I'm very lucky. I have amazing parents who are incredibly caring and loving and supportive and, just uncompromisingly so. So when you come from that level of security, it gives you a huge amount of confidence to manage change.
Right.
And so, I've always had that belief, you can do anything you want, and well, why shouldn't I? And, well, why shouldn't I? I'm the youngest.
That's right.
I don't care. Still going to do it.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, why not?
I deserve to be heard. But having said that, though, I still had lots of moments without confidence and imposter syndrome and
you're just human. We're just human.
Precisely. And this is the thing, everyone, when we look at people, we think, oh, they're so lucky because they don't have this, I have this negativity. And, I'll tell you what, everyone has that to different extents. But the way that you can build confidence is by knowing yourself, because then you trust yourself. And then by just having a go.
Having a go.
Yeah.
Conquering fear in a way and just having a go, or what do you mean by just having a go?
So stepping outside of your comfort zone. So the thing is that we will never imagine you're on a beach and you're looking at the sea. This is me probably when I first got to Australia and thinking there's no way I'm getting in that water, right? There's sharks, I'm going to drown. And
you're gonna slip, slap, sunscreen.
Precisely, exactly, all the essentials. And but then, I was like, actually, you know what, I actually quite want to have a go in the water. So you kind of put your feet in and, after a while you have a swim around and, probably a couple of years in, I was then doing the, swimming the Bondi Bay.
Oh, wow.
And
big achievement.
Not very well. Let's be honest.
Well, hey, you had to go.
Had to go. And this is the thing, had I not tried, I would have still been on the beach and I wouldn't have realized that I could do these things. And this is the thing, a lot of my focus is on women and confidence, because there's lots of different research, but there was an interesting piece done which was looked at men and women doing a 3D report, a 3D quiz. And
3D quiz. Okay, that's interesting.
It was a quiz that they had to do. And what they found was that men scored better than women. But when they looked at the results, they actually looked at what happened. If women found any of the questions hard, they skipped them, whereas men just had a go. And when they forced women to, when they said all of that, you have to answer all questions, men and women got the same results. And so this is the thing, if you don't try, you guarantee failure.
Why is there a distinction between male and female, Caroline, in terms of that question where they will just, if it's hard, they leave? Why would they leave it out?
Well, I mean, that's the big question, right? I think there's so much in terms of, is there a physiological difference? The way that our brains work. Male brains are more driven towards competition. Women's brains are more driven towards collaboration. And that's from a very young age. You see that in behavior of young boys and young girls. And women are also much more about connecting. There's the social piece is very important from a very early age as well. So is there part of it which is associated with I don't want to compete against other people? Is there is there something around that, around from a confidence point of view, whereas men are more driven by testosterone and it's competition.
Got to prove myself. We're going to win it. We're going to get it done all the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, some of the research shows that women ruminate more. And so, you know, a processing, you know, our brains are more emotional and are processing things in a more complex way as well. So with that in mind, you know, can we take a step too far, overthinking things, overthinking scenarios? You know, the number of times, you know, my partner would just like, you're completely overthinking it. Like, it's this or this. And I'm like, yes, but what about this and this? And, you know, it could be, and they might have said, and he's like, you're completely nuts. Like, that's total nonsense. So I think that, yeah, there's some really interesting imagery that they've done of male and female brains. It was University of Pennsylvania, I think. And they looked at functional MRIs, so functional magnetic resonance imaging, and saw that the majority of the kind of messages in your brain for men are front to back. So very much either or. Whereas women,
very binary.
Binary, exactly. Whereas women, the messages is they cross all the hemispheres. It's and it's fascinating when you see the difference. They looked at men and women, you know, young to old. And
is that risk management in a way, Caroline? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
well, this is the thing. So you know, from a risk management perspective, you know, quite a lot of the more, I guess, it was in the financial crisis, they found that women were better risk managers. And so whereas women might take longer to make a decision, the research implies that it's because they're looking at more data points.
They're crossing, they're going back, going forth.
Yeah. Exactly, kind of looking at it all, turning it around. Okay, you know, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Whereas men are, it's that more binary, yes, no, this, that, which is why sometimes you can have that kind of
mismatch.
When, yeah, exactly, when women are talking to men and you're kind of crossing.
So
paths.
if your partner goes to you, Caroline, you're crazy, you're overthinking, right? How does that then work, Caroline? Do you then accept it and go, hey, maybe I do need to think of it as a binary yes, no? Or is it more in a sense of, go away, I need to cross the T's and whatever to come to my own conclusion, because that's just how I am. The reason why I say that, Caroline, I'll give you an example, literally half an hour ago. So my wife is interested in doing this political science degree, which is offered by the university. The catch, of course, is that they're only going to bring in 20 people, and you need to fill in an application form. Now, I always know my wife, she always had that interest in sort of policy making, really understanding the mechanics behind, you know, setting policy for a society. So she goes, so me, being me and maybe being the man, so to speak, it's easy. You just fill in the application form, get it done, see what happens. Nice and easy. Very, very quick answer, right? So she goes to me, actually, maybe there are other women out there who would find this of greater value, hence I shouldn't take it and apply. And then I'm going, well, that may be true, but if you don't try, you're not going to know. You're making an assumption that's the case. So I'm going to her, just complete it, give it a go. You know, even if you don't get it, you at least have the experience of answering questions which you might need to get accustomed to going forward.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of an actual current example for you of the thinking difference.
Yeah, interesting. And it's I guess there's variance from the norm, right? So you can kind of think, oh, okay, you know, should I apply for this? Or maybe it'll be a bit competitive, you know, how will I fit it in with my life? You know, probably, you know, I've got 2 kids, what should I be, you know, and that's a smart, you know,
it's rational thinking. It's rational.
Precisely, and that's important, right? And it's important that you're acknowledging what feelings you have, what experience you have, and that you're putting it through those filters. I think the danger comes when you start scenarios which are quite far-fetched and don't necessarily have the ability to pull in from there, because I mean, that is, your wife is obviously an extremely generous person. Like, how lovely for her to think I might not.
Maybe it's like what you said, Caroline, in terms of the whole sort of social community thing. We don't compete, we work together. But then by her going down that path, she loses her opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and this is why, you know, it's a wonderful combination. This is why, you know, when we talk about gender equality, we're not talking about, you know, women taking over everything. We're talking about bringing the best of the brains together in organizations.
Yeah, because we need both.
It's the combination, which is both. Absolutely. You need both. And that's when you have both, you get so much better outcomes, because you're bringing together. Sometimes you do need to be a bit more binary about it, but sometimes, you know, you need to have more of that consideration, whether it's risk or people or, you know, the emotional impact of things. And, you know, the binary thing just won't work. Or it's a, you know, hammer and just smashing it in, and, you know, woe betide all the outcomes which, you know, you have as collateral damage.
Interesting. So, Caroline, you mentioned obviously women and confidence is a key area you work on, right? So, what do you tell these women who are in these certain positions and whatnot? You know, as we talked about before, you've corporate clients, you've individuals, it's online, right? So what do you tell these people, these women who may be lacking in confidence?
That's a very long course. But so basically the way the principles that I'm looking at is a lot of the coaching, a lot of the training that you would see normally, and I've had a lot of training in my life. You know, I'm very lucky to be part of corporates where I have been trained within an inch of my life, and as a result of that, I saw lots and lots of training. And the thing that I saw, some of it was excellent, but what I saw a lot of was training you, but without the why.
And it was the why. Okay.
Yeah, you know, just kind of, it's, you know, do this and you'll be more confident, or you know, speak up. Maybe it's communication skills, but there wasn't a why do we react in this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do I doubt myself? And if you think of it like an iceberg, you know, that there's the piece on the top, which is the outcome, your behaviors and your actions. But underneath, there's so much more to it, which is about who am I? Who do I believe I am? Who do I, what are my values? And, you know, what's that real subconscious belief that I have? And if you don't understand what's underneath the water, the outcomes of training, which, you know, is that surface level, it won't last, or it just won't be very effective.
It can also pull you in so many directions, because like what you said before, you need to know yourself.
Yeah. So I guess what I work on is the whole lot. If I was going to describe it, it's, you know, we look at who are you, where have you come from, what is your belief, you know, what is confidence, but what is real confidence? And this is why I talk about authentic confidence, because there's the bravado piece, there's the kind of, you know, maybe what society would define confidence as, but what I'm talking about is real, where you're integrating your internal and external authenticity. You know, there's not a break between them. You're not pretending to be something you're not, because ultimately real confidence is when you are 100% unapologetically yourself, because I've got nothing to hide. This is me. And no one can knock you off that, because it's like, this is me. So that's what we get to. It's about really helping people see who they are, and that it's okay to be you, and what are all the beautiful things, what are the amazing things about you, whether it's your values, your experience, and then loads of different tools.
I'm sold. Wow, so that's brilliant. So great analogy in terms of the iceberg, Caroline. So you're right. You know, I look back and I realize there's a lot of training that I've done in the past where it's just the tip of the iceberg. But what's most important and like what you're doing is that you're doing it from the base and then
Yeah.
going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic distinction.
Yeah, and the thing is that that sticks. That's when it's really super sticky, because it's something which you're fundamentally changing that self-belief. And otherwise you can kind of go and, you know, maybe Toastmasters, wonderful, amazing in terms of getting some of that kind of high level confidence. But if you fundamentally think you're a fraud, then you'll always have that feeling. So
imposter syndrome, being a fraud and whatnot. It's like basically saying, unless you fix the core,
yeah,
you know, if you're a tree, for example, and the stump and the roots are diseased, so to speak, it's going to make no difference if you repair one of the branches.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas when you have that root structure, which is really strong, whatever storms come, your tree will be fine. It can bend and shape, and but because you've got those anchors which keep you true to yourself, and this is what a lot of what we're doing. It's like, what are your values? What's important to you? Who are you? You know, when you're making big decisions, understand what is important to you, because otherwise you can make the wrong decision. And then dealing with your inner critic, if all the time you're listening to that negative voice, which everyone has, and you don't know how to manage it, and you know, you feel like it's such an integral part of yourself, it can be extremely destructive, and ultimately, you know, lots of people end up with chronic stress and, you know, burnout, depression, because of that. It's like having a radio playing all the time saying you're a loser, you know, you're fat, you're ugly,
you're not good enough,
you're not good enough, you know, you haven't done this, you're stupid. And when you start tuning into it, you go, oh my goodness, that's just horrible.
It's like that sort of those analogy where you have a little person on you. That little person on you can be egging you on in a positive way.
Yeah.
Or that person could be just dragging you down.
Yeah.
So where does that negativity come from, Caroline? You know, like, you know, kids and you know, like carefree, they can do anything, right? Do you think, I'm curious to understand and get your thoughts on where does that negative voice come from?
So there's a couple of answers to that. So there's, on the whole, for most people, if you talk to them about okay, so let's tune into your critic. Like, what does it say, and where does it come from? And if you're going to name it, you know, what name would you give it? It tends to be something from your childhood, maybe a parent, maybe a sibling, teacher, friend, whatever, or not a friend, someone at school. And depending on how reinforced that was, or how strong that initial experience was, depends how loud the voice continues to be.
And fortunately or unfortunately, it can really set the tone for how you live your life.
Yeah, yeah. Because if you're told you're stupid, if a teacher told you at school you'll never make it, you're stupid, you know, you're stupid one in the family, and if that was playing, you know, on repeat for years, or, you know, for that 1 year that you were in that teacher's class, that will keep coming. Absolutely. So it tends to come from there. The other interesting part of it is that we are tuned in to notice negativity more. So it is an adaptive response, which is, you know, it's quite helpful in terms of we're still on the planet as a result. And you know, it's ultimately, if we see things which might kind of cause us danger, which is essentially kind of what it is, it's trying to protect us. If we notice that more, as much as it's lovely noticing, you know, flowers and you know, excitement and joy, that's not going to save us when a saber-toothed tiger is running towards us. So the way our brain works is, I need to look out for danger. And,
hence, if there's news, hence what dominates the news nowadays is that negative news, but that's what draws the attention.
Totally. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, we're much more pre-programmed to notice it. It's like if you have a performance review and your manager talks to you for 55 minutes about all the wonderful things you've done, and then they talk to you for that 5 minutes about the one thing you did wrong, and that's all you can remember, and you're just furious about it for the next right? It's like that gets seared in our memories, whereas the other stuff's like, yeah, but they said this.
Oh yeah, don't worry about the 99 good bricks. I'm going to focus on that one bad one.
Right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, and so the Gottman Institute is focused on relationships, and one of the things that they talk about is the fact you have to have 5 positives for every 1 negative.
5 positives for every 1 negative. Okay.
So I'm helping your relationship here. So so if you say something negative, in order to kind of because that resonates so much, the same principle applies. You need to have 5 positive things in order to make up for that negative, because otherwise what can happen is you end up just in that kind of niggly piece where you're just going back and forth, and actually that can end up down a spiral of actually ruining relationships. So that is one of the things which they talk about.
So we have a phrase in Chinese called 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of SHIT.
Right.
But it seems to me they're telling me that you need to put 5 teaspoons of sugar.
Yes. Yeah. And when you look at when you look at the kind of primary colors of emotions, there are more of those emotions which are called kind of escape avoidance emotions versus those which are the kind of love and trust. And I studied some neuroscience with an amazing teacher, applied neuroscientist called Professor Paul Brown. And he has something called the London Protocol of Emotions, which was some research that he did, kind of looking at what are the primary colors. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we talk about emotions, but what are the things which really which make us up from an emotional perspective? And when you look at that, it is weighed more towards what we would call negative. They're not negative because they're very important, but they're more fear and anger and disgust and shame and sadness. Whereas you just you have love and joy, which kind of and an excitement piece on that kind of positive side, as it were.
So sorry, Caroline, why does the fear or distrust or that negative stuff, why does that dominate? Sorry?
Because it keeps us alive.
Okay, so it really comes back to the fundamental sort of flight versus fight response.
Yeah, totally. Because this is the thing. So our brains are about in current form are about 200 million years old. So we're operating on very old hardware. And that hardware has kept us alive, in the saber-toothed tiger kind of world, woolly mammoths, all that. So fear was gonna get us away from whatever it is attacking us. Shame is something that might threaten our position in a tribe, and being part of a tribe is incredibly important in terms of our safety. Disgust is probably about eating something and it being poisonous. And anger is something about someone who is again kind of from a tribe threatening perspective, and sadness is losing someone in that tribe. So these are kind of primary emotions which are all very important in terms of us surviving. And but the problem is that when we look at our filter today, office politics can make us feel like we're threatened in a tribe. Someone pulling out on us in a car park can.
Because the workplace is a tribe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and so when you start in a new workplace, you are you're trying to find your tribe, right? You're not part of it yet. So you're
the new member who's trying to get into the tribe. Therefore, you may need to prove yourself. You may need to be a bit more less of confrontational, so to speak, until you establish your rank, so to speak, within the tribe.
Precisely.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that is safety for us.
So what about new software? What is hardware?
We're developing it very slowly, I think.
Why is that?
Well, 200 million years is we've come pretty far, but
yeah, for me, right, 200 million years, right? The hardware hasn't changed, but you figure 200 million years, Caroline, we would have don't worry about the hardware. I don't think we can change the hardware. You figure the software would allow us to adapt. No? But it seems from what you've been sharing with me, right, is that the formation of the mind, so to speak, 200 million years in terms of tribes and whatnot, survival is no different from now in terms of the tribe being the workplace. And survival means I keep my job so I can put food on the table. So therefore, it's quite synonymous. So maybe, therefore, there's really no need for new software.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of the situations now that we're in, they cause us this survival response. And it is inappropriate. So, this is why so many people are stressed now. We have such high stress levels because we have this, your boss hasn't called you for a few days, you're working from home and you're thinking, oh my goodness, you have a negativity bias, you're automatically assuming, and then they go, can I have a word? And you think, oh, he's going to sack me. She's going to sack me. The number of people I've spoken to, and they're like, my boss called me and I thought, what have I done? And because we don't have the same social cues because we're not in the office anymore. And so, when your boss used to morning, just as they went past, even if they're in their office all day, that kind of, everything's okay. That in itself is a calming of any stress levels. And
it'll bring you comfort.
Totally.
It brings down the fear alerter, so to speak.
Precisely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Precisely. And so when everyone's remote working, we have a tendency to assume the worst. And so this is where connecting, being vulnerable, where from a leadership perspective, leaders have to be operating in a completely different way. They can't just be plug and play. I'll just do the same thing to people at home. If anything, they need to really step it up. And it's, you don't need to put emojis on everything that you do, but being conscious of, if you just say okay on your email, people might, are they angry? Like, is there? Whereas I actually have a theory. I have a theory on this, which I'm going to share with you.
Got it.
I have a theory that a lot of women are good at touch typing.
Touch typing.
Typing. You can type and not look.
Okay. I can't multitask. I'm focused.
Yeah. So, well, lots of, and particularly older managers. Older managers tend to be men. Yep. Just from the corporate pyramid perspective, and time. And when they type, they tend to use these. So 1, 2. Typing, in the days of my father, he would dictate to his secretary, and she would be typing it out for him. So we're not quite at that stage now, but I think there's certainly a lot of people who are older, who, for them to write a long email. So I write an email and say, hi Jeff, great to chat, really enjoyed our discussion, hope you had a good day, hope your wife was great, just to let you know, blah, 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 blah. Thanks very much, Caroline. And that will take me a minute. For the people who are typing like this, they're like, thanks, Jeff, Caroline, because it just takes them so much longer, right? So the softness around email, which is so important, because think of the negativity bias. We tend to think when an email comes through, whatever it is, it tends to be, we think of it from a negative point of view. We need that softness to make people realize that it's, that all is well. You don't have to have a threat response. If you don't have the ability to touch type, or just even type fast, or the inclination to learn, then you're much less likely to be able to create some of that softness. That is not a research-based approach. That is just, that's my thing.
I reckon that's pretty sound, because you're right. Because, okay, that's interesting. You're right. So if you have someone who's like this, so to speak, and, you know, regardless of the situation, he or she just doesn't like typing, right? That person could be misconstrued when an okay, they're actually typing okay with a massive smiley face. But obviously when it comes through the messaging channel, the recipient only sees okay, but not that gleaming smile. And that gleaming smile can't go into the keyboard because I can't type quick enough, and I gotta rush into the next meeting.
Exactly.
I think that's a pretty sound
fine one. That fine, and you're like, oh, fine. Fine, you know, fine can be anything, right?
So is it more about getting people to not take these things so seriously? Because by interpreting these little keystrokes and these words and whatnot, you could go crazy.
And people do, yeah.
You know, like you look at the email, you go, this doesn't mean this, doesn't mean that. That could put you in a massive head spin, regardless if it was pre or post COVID.
Yeah. The thing, pre-COVID, we had more social cues. We had more social messages to, you know, everything is okay. I think there's two parts to it. So there's a piece around the work that I do, primarily what I do in terms of the confidence. So around how can you help people feel absolutely at their best, so that they are operating at their best from a place where they are completely themselves. And they're bringing all of their cognitive bandwidth to the table because they're not in a state of fear. You know, they're bringing up things which are important. They feel comfortable to speak up, therefore they challenge, etc., etc. So there's a confidence piece as an individual, but then on the other side you have an organizational piece, and organizations need to make it safe for people to operate as well. And so this is where I think lots of organizations maybe aren't quite there yet in terms of creating psychological safety. And that is, you know, that is the environment in which I'm operating in. I feel safe to be myself. And so there's that external piece and there's the internal piece to it.
How do you, you know, if we, you know, obviously it's just a sample size. We look at corporate Australia, where you mentioned obviously a lot of, you know, a lot of men in that positions, and by all means they could be a bit older. But putting that aside, right, how does one bring psychological safety into organization?
Education is number one. I think people need to understand a lot of what we've been talking about and what the power is of it. So if you have all the brains in your organization in a state of fear, they're not using the prefrontal cortex. They're not using the smart executive functioning part of the brain.
We're constantly in that fight mode. We've got to protect. We've got to protect.
Precisely. So you're not thinking, oh, strategically, where should we be going if we look up?
There's no clear mind. There's no healthy mind, because you're too busy worrying about, I got to keep my job. I got to get that client coming in the door.
Exactly.
That's why culture is so important in organization then, when you think about it.
But well, this is the thing, and I think this is where we get lost, because culture is this kind of weird thing that people try and nail down, but there's never been any science behind. There's been little science in terms of why that is so important. And for me, the most fundamental thing is some of the work by Sean Achor. Like, your brain is 31% more productive at positive than negative, neutral, or stressed. So if you create a culture where people feel safe, where they feel they can be themselves, where they feel positive, where you go for drinks sometimes, or a team building day, you know, that cultural piece that we talk about, which is the kind of, I'll just leave it to the head of culture. That stuff is real. It is absolutely real in terms of organizational performance. And the problem is people don't, people in a lot of the positions, at the senior positions who are making the decision, the actual decision makers, don't understand that. Because when you put it from the perspective of this is a performance issue, whether or not, let's just say you don't even care about the people in your organization, if you want them to perform better, create an environment where they feel safe, because then they will use their brain in the way which creates all of that, uses all of the part of their brain which is creative and problem solving.
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But
so
why
this is why
organizations don't do it? And it makes perfect sense, Caroline. If you create an environment where your employees have an environment where they can feel safe, where they can be themselves, it's sort of a bit of a no-brainer, no?
Yeah. Well, and this is why I kind of hold my head, you know, now when I hear of organizations who are still operating on fear, you know, or we just drive them hard, and, you know, it's so sad.
Bit of a stick.
Because, yeah, it's so sad and it's counterproductive. Yes, you can get outcomes which are, you can achieve.
You can achieve astronomical things by all means.
Yeah, but at what cost? And, you know, if you look at the individuals that you had, that you achieved those outcomes with all of those costs, just think what you could have done if with people who were actually really operating at their best. Like, that's the organizations which are the stratospheric organizations are the ones which they have that kind of culture, they have that leadership. And I think
really top down, isn't it, Caroline?
Yeah, totally. It has to be. Yeah. And this for me is an interesting part about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because what I think has happened over the years is the number of times I would go to a International Women's Day conference or, you know, celebration, and there's 2 guys in the room, and there's, you know, 500 women. And there's this like, oh, you know, cheer for the men who are in the room, well done. It's like, oh my goodness, really? You know, this is precisely the problem. And of course, it's wonderful celebrating and having, you know, women and networking, all that stuff. But it's like, I think if we change the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion into, let's talk about psychological safety and about performance and people understanding how brains work in organizations, that
naturally gets answered.
Totally, it does, because then that brings in everyone to the conversation. That is men and women.